Did you know a lot of scholars think that the Gospel of John originally ended at the end of chapter 20 and that the entirety of chapter 21 is a secondary addition to the Gospel of John? Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and there is good reason to think that chapter 21 might be, in its entirety, a secondary addition. Let's take a look at the end of John chapter 20. We have in verse 30 the statement, "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name." Now that sounds like a nice, neat little way to tie off the Gospel of John. Say, there's a lot of stuff that Jesus did that isn't in here, and this is the reason I wrote what I did. That's how a lot of texts from this time period end, with the rationale for writing the text. But then chapter 21 breaks in and says, "After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he showed himself in this way." After these things, after I omitted a bunch of stuff, and after I wrote this text so that you may believe and so that you may have life in his name, this is an awkward transition from what should be the end of the text to another narrative. But there's more. Let's take a look at the end of chapter 21. This is the disciple who is testifying to these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. But there are also many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. So, who's we? And also, why are we going back to this idea that there's a bunch of stuff that Jesus did that wasn't written in this book? It seems kind of awkward and redundant, and also is introducing what sounds like an editorial group of some kind. And scholars have also pointed out that the syntax and the grammar of chapter 21 is distinct from the rest of the Gospel of John. It is a little less sophisticated. There's also some terminology and some thematic disconnects between chapter 21 and the rest of the Gospel of John. So these and a number of other considerations have convinced a number of scholars that John chapter 21 in its entirety is a secondary addition to the rest of the Gospel of John. Now, it would have been added pretty early, only a couple decades after the composition of the Gospel of John, and it would have been pretty widely accepted pretty early on, but it still doesn't sound like something that was actually written by the author of the rest of the Gospel of John. And if you would like to hear more about the Gospel of John and its composition and its rhetorical goals, Hugo Mendez has just published The Gospel of John, A New History, and the first chapter discusses the two main secondary additions to the Gospel of John, one being John chapter 21, the other being the story of the woman taken in adultery, that is at the end of John chapter 7 and the beginning of John chapter 8. But this book has been very good, very accessible, very clear and direct up to this point in my reading. So if you would like to see the cutting edge of scholarship on the Gospel of John, I'd highly recommend checking out Hugo's book. And the fit for this video has been the Black Panther.